Very recently, I've had reports about some sightings of another of the undead monsters I encountered in the dreaded Warlock's Crypt, the necropolis lair of the Archlich Larlock, the most ancient of his kind, once a living archmage in the great empire of magic. His lair is a crash-landed Netherese enclave city constructed on an actual mountain peak, sliced off by very high-level magic, levitated and flipped upside down to fly slowly through the air on nothing but raw magical force. The necropolis of Larlock still retains the beautiful stone sculptures and relief carvings of angelic beings, doves, flowers, and the like. It was originally an enclave named Orbidal. Later it was the lair of the lich named the Ageless, and eventually as the shackled scribe of Larlock. Rorgalath was once a living Netherese mage who dedicated his studies to the entire history of the Empire of Netheril. He eventually transformed himself into a lich, which is how he made it through the fall of the Netherese Empire when Orbidal crash-landed at the mouth of the winding river, not too far from Baldur's Gate. Later, the Archlich Larlock took full control of the enclave and has been using it as a base of operations. He is aware of the activities of the Twisted Rune Lich Cabal and the recent destruction of Changalar the Black and Shyrissa in Baldur's Gate, which lies south over the Troll Hills mountain range and foothills, over the winding river and impressive sea cliffs to get to the walls of Baldur's Gate. North of Warlock's Crypt, just through the Trollbark Woods and past the town of Daggerford, lie the walls of the fabled city of Waterdeep. In the buried enclave of Orbidal, once every wall was contoured to look like swirling clouds with skylight shafts of sunlight refracted by crystals into rainbow beams playing across dancing fountains. Oh, it would have been such an amazing place to visit, and a brilliant example of Netherese style of artistry, architecture, and arcana, so heavily influenced by the forest-dwelling Erlani elves, but with their own temperate, militaristic villa style. The cobbled pathways and great domed towers you can still see in the nations of Halruaa and Kalimshan. This Netherese Empire has a lot of Roman and Ottoman vibes to the architecture, though a lot of it is in ruins. There are shattered enclaves scattered across Faerun. Some do look like out-of-place mountain peaks flipped again to pulverize the city now beneath it. Larlock took over the enclave and transformed it into a complicated multi-level laboratory with tons of rooms with priceless treasure in the Archlich's collection. Among his most prized items are his journals and workbooks concerning the transfer of necrotic energy to boost undead allies. He has designed chambers in the enclave to rejuvenate undead creatures that are damaged. He has labs that failed their experiments to transform the Lich Alchemist and Necromancer cultists into gibbering mouthers. The labs have been slowly increasing Larlock's army of the undead, including the ones called the Death Shepherds. Death Shepherds are a type of elite skeleton undead. Although they loom over average humanoids at a height of 7 to 8 feet, they only weigh 80 pounds due to being essentially just armor-clad skeletons. Every part of their body is encased in fairly ornate armor, decorated with bones and skulls, spikes, and necromantic symbols. They are decidedly menacing with their aura of undeath that can often seen as a lurid greenish mist and a strong emanation of intelligence and evil intensity from their eye sockets. Their head is just a fleshless skull, and they have no vocal cords or capacity to speak. They don't have much need to. They let the hefty greatsword they carry do all the talking for them. While the Death Shepherds have only recently been sighted roaming around near Baldur's Gate and the mountain paths leading to the Rosy Morn monastery of Lathander, they were not just randomly summoned there by some mage who was contending with a strong force of Githyanki invaders. They were summoned from nearby, out of a great necropolis of Larlock the Archlich in the northern face of the Troll Hill Mountains. A long time ago, Larlock took control over the crash-landed Netherese enclave of Orbidal and turned it into a fairly massive battery of necrotic power. His experiments were carried out over the centuries, and eventually he perfected a form of undead regeneration chamber that restores undead creatures like himself to full functionality should they be seriously damaged. There were many living cultists and somewhat foolhardy arcane apprentices over the years who Larlock eventually murdered and turned into his own undead minions. The Death Shepherds are among some of the most potent of those warlords who carried out the magical rituals and channeled large amounts of necrotic power. invariably being transformed into powerful undead in the process. Strength, Constitution and Wisdom of 14, Dexterity of 12, Intelligence of 10, a Charisma of 5 and a speed of 30 feet per round. They have a +3 proficiency and are +1 on initiative. They have an armor class of 16 and at least 42 hit points. Death Shepherds are not only immune to the Turn Dead ability, they confer this on all other undead within 30 feet, along with 20 temporary hit points and resistance to all damage except radiant energy. They can also supernaturally silence all sound immediately adjacent to them, along with the space they occupy. Their primary attack is their greatsword. They are +3 to hit and inflict 4 to 14 slashing damage with a single swing each round. Or they can use their spell-like necromantic ability to raise a fallen undead within 10 feet back to action with half of its hit points restored. Their presence in any group of undead creatures is extremely dangerous, as you can imagine. The boost of an automatic 20 temporary hit points and comprehensive damage resistance can turn immunity to potentially 144 adjacent, tightly packed medium-sized undead allies. That's extremely effective. When eventually dispersed through an army of the undead, each rank and file troops of skeletons, they are of very bad news. Add that to their ability to simply command a minion to rise up and carry on fighting after it's fallen. Larlock's creation of the Death Shepherds may be the result of years of study and experimentation. It may have been a happy accident, or perhaps it was knowledge granted by Orcus, the demon lord of the undead. Who knows? I shudder to imagine the sort of undead army that could potentially march out of the extensive fallen enclave, now a hidden bastion of entropic power, and within a couple of days' march of both Baldur's Gate and Waterdeep, who would have almost no warning that such devastation was about to strike. It's like the shadow of death itself is looming over the heart of the Sword Coast, and I dare not raise the alarm, because Larlock is always watching. How does one sneak up on a lich? Well, remain invisible, avoid setting off alarms and traps, don't disturb resting vermin, and avoid undead guards. Have many ways of escape, such as teleportation scrolls and potions of gaseous form, and some sort of protective mask is not just wise in a necropolis, it's basic safety gear. The Netherese Archlich didn't just convert the enclave to run laboratories and library space. There are also many storage barracks for constructed and restless minions, which has attracted the attention of a couple of tomb tappers. These things have been busy in the deepest towers of the trash-landed necropolis, but more on that next time. For now, thanks for listening. My name is AJ Pickett. Like, subscribe, visit my Patreon and join the Discord server, and as always, I'll be back with more for you very soon.